There's a number of questions that come through. So some of these are from Alan, and then there's some which are from the people who have been emailing in. And I'll try and show you the sorts of things you can do. I see there's a bunch of questions going through there with when Strava going to make me a zillionaire. Hopefully when someone on Strava writes me a big check, that would be very nice. But I'm glad it's your go-to site. That's all good. Okay, so pacing better on climbs and time trials. So this is probably, for me, it's one of the main things which I use the site for, is for because I don't do racing as such. I used to race as a junior, but I've not raced for many years, and last year I turned 40, so I got into the vets category and made a real effort of trying to do well in some of the hill climbs, and I found that Strava really taught me how to ride up hills as fast as possible, and the same applies to time trials, but maybe not quite so obviously. So in terms of pacing on the climbs, you can't really go wrong with a power meter. That's, unfortunately, I know they're expensive, but it massively makes a difference to how you can pace yourself. So it's all around about knowing what your power curve is, and then once you know what you can do for a given amount of time, then you can use that to pace your climb. And there's some future features which I'll come on to at the end, which go into much more detail about where I'm hoping to take this. But in terms of what we have here is around the power curve. So currently so here we are looking at my data in Veloviewer. The first thing that's new that people see is this efforts tab, and I just made this live today. So we've always had activities and segment lists, but now we've got efforts. So this is basically everything you've ever done on a segment. So your segments is your PRs of every single PR for your segments, whereas your efforts is absolutely every single attempt you've had. It'd be interesting to see how this works for people with a ludicrous amount of efforts and segments. So for myself, I've got nearly 12,000 records in here. So you can see I've had 4 tries on that particular segment. So there are my 4 tries, and it has my elapsed time for each of those tries, and all the other stats that you have on the segments tab. But now, as opposed to just being your PRs, you've got them all in here. So where this becomes useful is when you're is to try and get a power curve. So if you've got a power meter, and if you're a premium user on Strava, then you get this page here, which is the true power curve. So this is using all of your power data from all of the rides that you've uploaded with using a power meter. And this is the invaluable tool that if I know I'm going to do a climb which is 5 minutes long, it's going to take me roughly 5 minutes, I know that from that I'm going to be going at 440 watts or something like that. So yeah, so that's how I know how hard I can try on hills. But if you've not got a power meter, or if you're not a premium user, there's a way you can get some useful information from your efforts. So if we turn on the charts, and then we change this to show, so on the y-axis we have elapsed time, which we've already got. On the y-axis we have power, and I think we definitely don't need to have anything for size. And then the color is quite useful to just, if you do use a power meter, sometimes it's just to set that to power meter. So this is basically your power curve now. So this is showing your elapsed time and power. So it's a linear scale, whereas if you look at the power curve here, then it goes from seconds to minutes to 10 minutes to half hours to hours. So they're using like a logarithmic scale there to make it a bit easier to look at. So this is purely a linear scale here, but it can still give us lots of information that we need. So if we, I can filter out, say, all of the power where it's below my FTP, which is around about 320, something like that. So if I type 320 in there, I got rid of a lot of the data that you're not really concerned about. So you can see here that these ones are getting up to about an hour, and so 339 watts is for about an hour. So you can kind of see the curve here. There was a few ones which are sticking out around here, and the color is whether it's a power meter or not. So there was some discussion with on Ray Maker's podcast the other week about the effectiveness of the Strava estimated power. And if you look here, all the green ones are the estimated, and all the brown ones are the real power. So it's not that much difference, and there are a few which are way out, and that's because it's potentially what bike I was on, but also the fact that I was hanging in a big group and getting pulled down a hill really fast, so it does struggle with some of the downhills. So what you can do is if we add in some of the filters in here, like the climb category, for instance, and what else could we, if we put in the power meter as well. So we could say, okay, I only want to look at the categorized climbs, and now you can see all of that information based on the on just the climbs. So there's less data, which is unrealistic. There's still a few. There's some which are out here. I have no idea what that one is or why that's out there, but it kind of gives you a bit of a gist. So if we didn't have a power meter, so if we turn off the power meter, you can still kind of get a rough idea of what your power curve might be like based on the estimated power, which might be of some use. So if we look at a particular, so then what I do in terms of working out how to best pace a climb is I'll find a segment. So quite topical, because it's the Montsel Hill climb on Sunday, which I'm not nervous about yet, because I've got this to be nervous about first, but I'll get nervous about this from as soon as I finish this. So so it's a short climb, but even on these short ones, you still need to pace yourself to do them. So if we look at two of my efforts on here, so I'll pick two that have got power meters. So this one here. So this was one of my practice rides, was it last year? And what I then would do is go into my segments list, and I find the climb I want, and rather than clicking on the link, you just click on the line itself, and that selects that area in the top there. So now if I flick to the data, it's got the data purely for that climb. So you can see the speed there and the heart rate and the power, and that's from the power meter. One thing just while I'm in this screen, just in case people didn't know, is that you can also click on these little charts in the zones tab to highlight this top section, which isn't the most obvious of things, and I need to make it more obvious up in the top somehow, but that's quite an interesting thing. So potentially look at the power and see where a quick glance where your power was over the ride. But if we go back to the data here now, so what I'm interested in is how well I pace myself up the climb, and it's got the wiggly line here for the power, and you can kind of see that it is going down, but depending on how complicated the climb is, sometimes it's better to use the bar option to split it up, say into quarters. So now it's showing you the average for each of the quarters, or maybe we did it in halves to see if we did a negative split, and no, that's a massive positive split in terms of my power on that climb. So it's obvious that I went far too hard early on and then couldn't sustain it. So I learned from that, from looking at this, I learned, okay, what I need to do is maybe not go off quite so hard and try and pace it a bit better. So when I actually did the hill climb, if we look at the power from this, so this is from last year's one, and then we go to the segments tab, pick the climb, and then go to the data, and I'll flick it back to the bar and into quarters again. So the power this time is much more steady, except I did die on that last section there. So I know that last few hundred meters, I really need to hold something back for that bit. And I know that I lost a good few seconds because of that dropping off of power. So it's really interesting to be able to look back at stuff in this way, and that's one of the main things I do when I come in to use the site, is to look at all those efforts like that. Yeah, so that was, so I was saying there's some more. I'm going to come back to that in terms of future features, in terms of better pacing. So we'll come back to that later on.